As Angela had said, again, welcome to today's webinar. We're really excited to have you here. This is part of the series of webinars hosted by CQL on the personal outcome measures. And today we're going to focus our time on People Choose Services. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm a Quality Enhancement Specialist with the Council on Quality and Leadership. And I would like to highly recommend that if you have a personal outcome measures manual, that you have it available to reference. People Choose Services, the area that we're going to focus on today, is outlined on pages 74 through 76 of the manual. So let's start by talking about CQL's vision and its mission. The vision of CQL is a world of dignity, opportunity, and community for all people. Okay, not just one group of people, but all people. The mission of CQL is that CQL is dedicated to the definition, the measurement, and the improvement of personal quality of life. For 50 years, CQL has really sought to understand what is important to people and how supports can be provided to help people live the lives that they want to live. Now, I think it's helpful to understand a little bit, if you're not already aware, of the history of the personal outcome measures. So even though CQL has been around for 50 years, the POMs didn't come about until about the early 1990s. And it was in the early 90s that CQL realized that people who use services were missing from the table. So CQL invited people with developmental and intellectual disabilities, people with lived experience in mental health services, parents, and thought leaders to join in focus groups to look at quality measures. Now, there was a big difference in what people and their families wanted compared with what professionals wanted. So the personal outcome measures were developed and piloted in 2 states, 3 organizations, and then field tested in the United States and Canada. In 1993, the very first personal outcome measures tool with 30 outcomes was published. In 97, it was reduced to 25. And then in 2005, data analysis led to combine several more outcomes, reducing the number to 21. Now, at multiple stages, factor analyses and validation testings continue to demonstrate the validity of the 21 outcomes. CQL's initiative to redefine quality in terms of personal outcomes using the POM influenced subsequent person-centered approaches at the state and federal level and within the disability community. And most recently, in 2017, CQL completed a revalidation of the POM and demonstrated continued validity of the 21 outcomes. Now, based upon statistical relevance, they were reorganized into 5 factors from the previous 3 factors of myself, my world, and my dreams. The personal outcome measures offer person-centered solutions that really work to keep people happy and safe, offer people real choice, and wisely direct valuable resources. Now, here are the 5 factors within the personal outcome measures. Okay, so these are the 5 main areas of the POM: my human security, my community, my relationships, my choices, and my goals. And of course, our focus today is on People Choose Services. And this indicator falls within the factor of my choices. My choices also includes 2 other indicators: people choose where they work and people choose where and with whom they live. But again, our focus today is on People Choose Services. So what I would love for you guys to do, if any of you are willing to share, is type in the Q&A box a service that you receive in your personal life. So a service that you pay for or that your benefits pay for, such as your insurance. Now, Some of the services that I receive or my husband and I receive include things like the dentist, the eye doctor, my hairstylist, my massage therapist, the spa where I get my pedicures, my bank, the pharmacy, veterinarian, our insurance agent, therapist. There's a whole lot of them. This is just a small list. Okay? And these change over time. And we'll talk about this as we go through the next hour. But every one of us receives different services in our life, and those are based on our priorities and needs. Now, for just a quick example, being away from home with CQL and the work that I do, pre-pandemic, we are on the road, maybe 2-3 weeks a month. And so we leave on a Monday oftentimes and come back on Friday. And because of that, not being home a lot, one of the things that's valuable to me is a clean house. And so pre-pandemic, being away from home a lot, we decided to pay for a house cleaning service so that it wasn't something we had to worry about or spend our entire weekend doing. Because when you leave on a Monday and come home on a Friday, the last thing you want to worry about is spending your entire weekend just making sure the house is. So once that travel paused, though, in early 2020, we stopped that service since I was home more, and we could equally divide more of our time. And so we had more time to put towards that regular cleaning that we valued so much. And not have to spend our entire weekends doing that. So that is a service that we have used, but based on priorities and just life, that has shifted. Now, just an overview of what today is going to look like. First of all, just an introduction really and breakdown of choice and services. Then we'll get into the key concepts of choosing services. The main ideas, principles, and values around people choosing services. We'll talk about information gathering, general tips and tricks, ideas that are more specific to this indicator. Okay. Then we'll get into decision making. So decision making, the outcomes and supports, and we'll go through that decision-making matrix in the manual, along with some important additional considerations to think about for this area. We'll talk about some common misconceptions around this indicator. And then finally, we'll have some one of the slides on some resources that are very beneficial in relationship to this indicator and, of course, services and the personal outcome measures in general. So again, people choose services. This is within factor 4 of my choices, one of the 3 indicators in this factor area, along with people choose where and with whom they live and people choose where they work. Again, the pages in the manual are pages 74 through 76. So I really want to spend a few minutes talking about choice and what that means. And the definitions that are on the slide are dictionary definitions. They're from Merriam-Webster and from dictionary.com. But the choice component of this is very, very, very important. To choose or to have a choice means to select freely and after consideration. Okay. So it means that we've considered what our choices are, and we have made a determination. We have selected based on what it is that we want, which leads us to that second definition, to have a preference for. So it means that we have selected based on what we prefer. So when we have to make a choice, we have decided on one that we have a preference for. Okay? We chose one car over another. If any of you have ever car shopped before, you know how much fun that can be. And I say that kind of sarcastically for many of us. But it's about choosing or to have a preference of one over another or over others. It also means to select from a number of possibilities or pick by preference. And here we go back to preference, okay? So the person is making a decision, having a choice, picking by preference. It is what they prefer. And that takes us right down to that very last definition as well, to prefer or decide. Okay? So again, going back to what we prefer when making a choice between multiple things. Now, the idea of choosing goes beyond just what's listed here as the official definitions. It's about being informed. And we're going to use that word repeatedly over the next 45 minutes. In order to make true choice, we have to be informed on what our options are. And any of you that have been through one of our personal outcome measure workshops knows that we talk a lot about the 3 E's. And the 3 E's are experience, education, and exposure. You have to have those 3 things in order to be informed. Okay? Before buying a house, before making any big decision, we want to be informed on what we're getting into. Okay? And that involves experience, education, and exposure. Now, choice is providing an array of options. Okay, having all them in front of us and then making that decision. And it's about providing an array of options and then honoring the person's decision while recognizing we all have the right to change our mind. All of us, I'm sure, can say that we've made decisions before that we then went and changed our mind about. And that's okay. That's just life. We make decisions and then we change our mind. Okay, based on our experience with maybe our decision and it's not meeting our needs. But the importance of choice in our life cannot be understated. Exercising choice supports people to feel in control of their destiny. And feeling in control helps us to feel content that our life is our own, not somebody else's or not dictated by somebody else. It really is the foundation on which all of us build all the outcomes in our lives. And like I said, throughout our lives, we make many choices. And these choices really express our priorities and uniqueness as people. Day to day, we make lots of little choices. But as we go through life, there are lots of choices that go beyond the day to day. And that's important for all people, not just those day to day, what am I going to wear, what am I going to eat, but those things that have a major impact on our lives as well. Now, again, we make many choices, and those choices really do express our priorities and uniqueness as people, and that changes over time. And that's okay. It changes based on our current life situation, our needs, our wants, our preferences. And, it encompasses many aspects of a person's personality and life experiences. It really does lead to decision-making and self-determination. And self-determination doesn't happen in an atmosphere or in a bubble where there are scheduled time to make choices. Self-determination and decision-making happens throughout life. So, something I want you to think about, and you don't have to put it in the Q&A box here, but I just want you to think about it. A choice that you've made recently, whether that be a new doctor, a hairstylist, anything, insurance, what influenced that final choice? What made the impact? What was the deciding factors in that final choice that you made? The other really key component of People Choose Services is services. What does that even mean? Well, a service is defined as work performed for remuneration. Now, that's our dictionary.com definition. Okay? And remuneration is the rewards or pay or compensation. And that can be payment or compensation through money, through cash, or benefits, such as insurance, Social Security, Medicaid, etc. Now, the second bullet point is the definition from Merriam-Webster, And that means they're saying it's the act of serving, such as a helpful act. We did him a service. Or a useful labor that doesn't produce a tangible commodity, and it's usually used in the plural, such as they charged for professional services. Now, I would love for Angela, if she could, to go into our Q&A box and share some of the services that people shared.
Well, Liz, they shared a lot of the same ones you did, you know, hairdressers and other things, Weight Watchers, personal trainers, your cable, your internet, all your kind of media options, tattoo artists, who delivers your packages, your pastor, your religious affiliation, neurologists, your grocery delivery service, the people who take care of your car for maintenance and repair, banking, all sorts of things, house cleaning, buying things. So yeah, quite a wide variety.
Absolutely. Thank you, Angela. Yeah, it just, there's so many services that are out there, and everybody uses the ones that they need or that are their priority. I can't believe in all the services that I was writing down preparing for this, I forgot to even put my cell phone service. That's such a big one. And I probably forgot about it because I've used the same one for so long. So your cellular services too, who you get your phone service through, is such a big one. But services, additionally, in the context here, when talking about people that are supported by organizations, we're talking about generic services, which means services used by all of us. So some of the ones that you just said, some of the ones that I shared, all the ones that you shared in the Q&A box. But it also is talking about disability specific services. Okay, and so those also include the provider of those services, and the provider could be a residential provider if a person receives residential services. It could be an employment specialist or a job coach provider if someone receives those types of services. It could be a service coordinator if someone receives those services. But in addition to the provider agency or the provider organization, it's also about the staff that provide those services, which could be direct support staff. It could be a CNA. It could be a service coordinator, a job coach, an employment specialist. So it's the provider organization and also the people, the staff that are providing those services. So when we talk about services, we're talking about those generic services used by everyone and disability specific services. Now let's get into some of the key concepts of choosing services that are specific to this area. So the first one is really, it's about having an array of options. Again, this is something that we talk about a lot within the personal outcome measures workshop. But when we talk about an array of options, we really mean all available options. Now, of course, this may be based on geography, because in some rural locations, they're going to be more limited in choice than in more urban locations. I live in a town of about 35,000 people. Now, I have a lot of surrounding towns that I have to choose from as well. But we know in many parts of this country and other countries, there are more isolated parts where people receive services. And so it's about really understanding what's available to me in my geographical location. In New York City, there's going to be a lot more opportunity and availability than there is in, say, rural North or South Dakota. Okay. So we have to look at all available options. The second bullet point here is about services focusing on personal goals and desires. Now, the key word for me here is the focus part. And when we talk about services, they have to focus on people's preferences, goals, and desires, what's important to them. Okay. So there are lots of services to choose from out there, but they're not all going to meet the need of everyone, which is why there are that variety of providers. Okay. You may choose your dentist based on different priorities that you have than someone else choosing their dentist. The cell phone service, okay? You may have different needs when it comes to cell phone service than somebody that maybe has 5 people on their plan and they need something different. The third bullet point is that all available options have to be presented and explained to people. People have to be informed. Okay, so again, this is going back to being informed. People have to be informed of options of the services. They have to be discussed with the person, okay, not just presented to them, okay? So not just here's bank 1, here's bank 2, here's bank 3, but they really have to be presented, explained, and described. I always think of this as the pros and cons of each. What objectively are the pros and cons of each choice that we have in whatever service it is that we're looking for? The fourth bullet point is around people knowing they can make a change. This is such an important component of this area. People have to know that they can make a change if they're not happy, that they're not stuck. Okay? And that if they ask for or indicate that they want to change, that it's going to be followed through with. Now, I once spoke to a young man when I was doing a POM with this young man, and he told me flat out, oh, yeah, I can change whenever I want. But as we got more into the conversation and the POM, and we were talking more and more about more things, I learned that, in fact, he wasn't happy with his bank, but his staff told him that he couldn't switch because that was the bank everyone used. Okay, so he told me one thing, but as we got to really talking and learning more, I learned kind of some other things that were going on here. Okay. The fifth bullet point is about providing choice and control within a person's life. You know, it really is important that people have choices and that the control to change their minds, because, you know, having that sense of control is very meaningful. And we all know that there are times we don't get to control things in our life. That just happens. But we need to ensure that the people that are being supported have control and choice as much as anybody else has. And really, control and choice is one of the best services that we can give to people. The sixth bullet point is around services helping people get what they want and need. All services that people choose and receive should help them get what they want and what they need. Services should work to do both of these things. And just a quick story here. When my mom went through cancer, there were qualities and things that she wanted from her doctors, her medicines, and us as her children, but also things that she needed that she wouldn't necessarily state was something that she wanted. She wanted to get rid of the cancer like we all did. She wanted an oncologist that was closer to home and that would be open and honest with her. Okay. She needed someone to drive her to chemo and to be there to get all the information she was being given. She wouldn't have asked that. My mother, throughout our entire lives, always just did what needed to be done, but never took care of herself first. She also needed someone at home to support her and my dad so that she could rest and concentrate on her health and not be concerned with anything else. These were the things that were important when looking at the doctors and where she was going to have treatments. Lastly, services assist people to realize personal goals and to achieve outcomes important to them. Now, this is different than the second bullet point on the slide that talk about services focusing on goals and desires. This one is about actually assisting people to achieve personal goals. And one of you in the Q&A box put Weight Watchers, and that's interesting because my example is really around, you know, if I want to lose weight. Now, if I want to lose weight, different services may focus on different ways to get there. So for me, it may not be that Weight Watchers may not be the right one for me because it's not going to assist me to realize my goal in the way that I need it to. but there may be another one that actually assists me in the way that I need it to. So I may want to focus not on the eating, because I love to eat and I want to eat whatever I want. I want to focus more on the exercise. So maybe the service I need is to find a good gym and personal trainer rather than the Weight Watchers. Okay, so services have to assist people to help them realize their personal goals and achieve what's important to them. Now let's talk a little bit about information gathering for choosing services. You know, we're going to talk about this both in general terms of the personal outcome measures and information gathering specific to people choose services. Okay. So generally speaking, and you're going to see overlap between this slide and the next, and that's because these points are extremely important. Information for this outcome, for this, really does start with other outcome areas. So there are 21 outcome areas, and we don't just learn about people choose services when we get to this page in the book and start asking these questions. We learn about this in other areas as well. So we may learn when we're talking to people about how they chose where they live and who their roommates are. We might also learn about how they came to choosing their service provider and their staff. In the area of people choose where they work, as we're learning about how they came about the place that they work or the day program that they attend, we might also learn about how they selected their job coach or the organization that helps them with employment services. In Best Possible Health, you know, we're learning so much about health, but we might also learn about their doctors, therapists, and counselors and how they were chosen, and if those people are meeting their needs. In Continuity and Security, we learn a lot about staff supports, how staff are chosen, how people are involved in the process of choosing their staff. And then in Participate in the Life of the Community, we might learn about places people like to go, some of which provide more than just maybe a product, but also a service as well. So we really want to take opportunity to pause and reflect how we bridge into this conversation, because again, the POM is a conversation. It's not an interview, and we don't want to look at that as an interview, as a stuffy interview where it's just all questions bombarded at the person. It needs to be a conversation. You know, that leads us right into focusing on natural human conversations, asking questions, learning about people and what's important to them and how they came to those choices and what's going on in their lives. We might also take a cue from the environment. We can learn a lot just by, you know, looking at pictures, having people show us pictures of things that are important in their life and people. Paraphernalia, clothing, you know, something that the person said in another area, like we talked about, you know, what their interests are, or even a dream of someday, something that they want, or a short-term dream that they have for themselves. But the goal really is about having the person take the lead in the conversation, okay? Letting it flow naturally. With this, you know, as you ask questions and learn things from people, you want to dive deeper as you discover people's interests and about their past and how things came to be in their lives. You know, go beyond those surface questions to find out the why and the how of things. And it's always great to ask staff when you're asking staff some follow-up questions, you know, how do you know? You know, especially when people don't maybe use words to communicate, it's important to find out from the staff, how do you know what's important to the person? How do they demonstrate that? How do they show you what's important and what they need and want? We want to really stay away from questions that would lead people down a specific path. So we want to avoid those leading questions. Things such as, so you're happy, right? We want to stay away from that. We want questions to be as open-ended as much as possible. using those closed or yes/no questions simply for clarification, just to make sure that we've got it right what they're telling us. And as we talked before, the POM, the whole conversation should be conversational. And, you know, we talked already about moving amongst the other outcomes. We don't have to go in order. And as you become more familiar with the POM, and as you become, you know, you use the POM tool more often, you really get a better sense of how you can do this. So practice makes perfect. You don't have to go in order. You don't have to finish one outcome before moving to another. Information from every outcome leads to informing others. So it happens very naturally. And then, of course, you're going to gather information from the person, of course. First and foremost, always start with the person receiving services. Okay? But you're also gathering information from the staff that knows them best, from follow-up, from a family member. You want to gather information from as many sources as possible to really get a good holistic view of the person. But of course, you always start with the person because you have to know how they define things and what their priorities and preferences are for themselves. So again, you know, dig deeper, okay? How have services been explored with the person? Okay. Find out, how do you know what choices are? How does the person know what their choices are? How did they come to choose those services that they get? Okay. Asking people if those services are helping them in the way that they need. Or if, you know, is there anything that those services are not doing for them? Thinking about how services have been explored, ask questions, find out how those things have been explored, how people have been educated on what their options are. Continue to focus on variety based on informed personal choice. So again, we go back to that informed piece. Is the person aware of the options that are available so they can truly make choices? And again, beyond just knowing that they exist, but what can that service do for me? What do they offer that's different from the other ones, the other choices? Ask the open-ended questions and really find out, when people express their desires, are they truly listened to? Okay. So we need to ask questions that discover from both the person and the staff that are not only if people feel like they're being listened to, but is it really happening? So some more considerations to explore specific to People Choose services. Number one, what services is the person receiving? Again, looking back to all the ones that we have shared just in the last 30 minutes, what services is the person receiving? Okay. How and who decides what service the person is going to receive? Who decides the person needs that? Is it the person, or is it somebody else making that decision for them? Finding out from the person, can they change if they want to? Okay. Or is someone putting a roadblock that allows them not to change? What options have been presented to the person? If they're only aware of one bank when choosing a bank, that's not being informed of the options. It's about showing them what's out there and available to them, and then helping them make informed choice based on their priorities. So then, of course, how were those options presented to the person? Okay, were they presented in a way that made sense to them? And we'll talk a little bit about how that can be done. And then lastly, are the services that the person is receiving meeting their needs and their expectations? Again, many types of services exist for all people. So we have to find out the different types that people are using and if there are any that they want or need and don't currently have. Again, we talked about, many times things like doctors and dentists are chosen based on insurance, okay? And we may be more limited when it comes to those things, but it shouldn't be any different than it is for anybody else, disability or not. Okay. We want to make sure that these services are meeting people's needs and expectations. Okay? And we learn this through the entire POM conversation, which another area of people choose goals is a good area where information can be learned as well. When we start to find out and ask what people's personal goals are, we can really then find out, are they getting the services that they need to help them meet that goal? Now, this is probably a slide some of you have seen. Again, it's the 3 E's, the education, the experience, and the exposure. Okay, so for those of you that are familiar, you have definitely been introduced to these things. These are the tenets of the personal outcome measures. And they're the tenets because in order for people to make informed choices, they have to have education, experience, and exposure. Okay. Certainly for this outcome, we need to know that the person has the education and the exposure to choices that may not have been there before. So knowing all the options and having control over the ultimate decision of those services. So again, when we say people choose services, that choice must be informed. And to be informed, you must have education, experience, and exposure to make decisions. Okay, so let's go into your manual and really focus on the decision-making matrix for people choose services. Now, some decision-making basics here. In the manual, people choose services. This is on pages 74 through 76. With the decision-making really being on page 76. Okay. You want to make sure that you're using the most current manual, which is the 4th edition from 2017. You always want to ask people and staff, how do you know? How do you know this is the service people want? How do you know people have been informed? How do you know this is helping them meet their goals? We want to take all evidence and information collected during the personal outcome measures and apply it to our decision making in this area. And just a good note too, on page 74, there's a section on values and principles for the organization. And these are always great to refer back to. And lastly, before we move into the decision making, always use your book for decision making. Always. This is, like we like to call it, the Bible of the POMs. You have to have your manual in order to make decisions on whether this outcome and support are in place or not in place yet. Okay. So use the manual for decision making. Okay. So let's walk through the decision-making matrix for the outcome for people choose services. Okay. So 19.1, does the person select the services and or supports that they receive? Now, these things are just example. For example, this is not an all-inclusive list. This could be residential services, in-home services, employment or day services, health services, case management, and all those generic community services that we've talked about extensively today. Okay. So this is not just one service or another. These are all our services within our life. Does the person select the services and or supports that they receive? 19.2, do the services and or supports focus on the person's goals? Okay, and again, it gives some examples. 19.3, does the person have choices about service provider organizations? Okay, so does the person have choices regarding who's going to provide them their disability services along with their generic community services, the cell phones, the banks, the therapists, the doctors, the Weight Watchers, whatever that may be. In 19.4, does the person have choices about direct support professionals and other staff, which could be direct support staff, case managers, service coordinators, it could be my job coach, my employment specialist. Does the person have choices about those people? And if the answers to all 4 of those are yes, then the outcome is present. Okay. Now again, we need to refer back to the 3 E's. Okay, and think about choice, options, and information. So in order to answer those 4 questions, we have to know, number 1, what services the person uses. Okay, what services does the person use? What services do they get? We have to know what the person's goals and priorities and preferences are in regards to services. Third, we have to know what choices have been provided and if they are able to change those services. And then we also need to know how the person is involved in choosing the staff that provide them their services. So there's a lot of information that we need to know before we can answer those questions. Okay? And those are the outcome questions. Next, the individualized support questions for this area. Now, keyword again there is individualized. Okay. 19.A, does the organization actively solicit the person's preferences about services, provider organizations, direct support staff, and other staff? Again, this is not an all-inclusive list, but does the organization actively solicit their preferences? 19.B, does the organization provide options to the person about services, provider organizations, direct support staff, other services? Okay. So does the organization provide the options that are available? And lastly, does the organization honor the person's choices about the services, providers, staff, etc., that they want? And then based on the answers, are individualized supports in place to help facilitate that outcome for the person. Individualized is a key word there. It has to be individualized to this person. We're not looking at everybody, we're looking at this person. Some important components of this is actively, okay? Are we actively soliciting, not passively waiting for a person to come to us? Are we asking and advocating for people, understanding their preferences and priorities? Are we actively providing choices and options and helping them understand that they can change if they want or need? And then are we acting on what it is that people want? Not gatekeeping the decisions or making decisions for them based on what's easiest for others or based on what others think best. You know, every year, the eye doctor is a very important service that I receive because my eyes are so bad. And it always has been my entire life. And I have been through a number of eye doctors trying to find one throughout my life that I really liked that met my needs. And so about 16 years ago, I was able to find that person. But every year after I go in for my appointment, then I kind of do an internal reflection on, is this doctor still meeting my needs? Am I still getting what I need out of this optometrist, out of this clinic? And so I'm always reassessing within myself, is this still what I need? And that's what we need to do with people. Okay. Now, with this area, there are additional considerations. And these are really, really important. The first one really is that, you know, even though the person may not have chosen the services or the providers initially, if they are now choosing to maintain that service after options have been presented, then it can be present, then that outcome can be present. Like I just said about my eye doctor, it's about reassessing to see, is the person meeting my needs? What else is out there? Do I need something different? So it's about actively continuing to have conversation about what people need and what other options are potentially available. Now, something very important here is the absence of complaint does not equal satisfaction. We have to be proactive and continuously check in with people. Okay? We had to do that with our insurance company. We had to check in and realize they weren't meeting our needs anymore, and we had to switch. And so we looked around and found another agency that was going to meet our needs based on how things have changed in our life. Okay? So the absence of complaint does not equal satisfaction. I may not have a wonderful experience at every hotel I stay at. I may not be 100% satisfied, but even myself, I'm not going to necessarily go out and make that formal complaint. If I get an email survey from the hotel, then 99.9% of the time, then I will complete that survey and there express what I was dissatisfied with. But I wouldn't just do it on my own. I wouldn't take the initiative to do that most of the time. So we want to make sure and remember that absence of complaint does not equal satisfaction. We have to check in with people. In People Choose Services, the choice of place of work or place of residence is not the issue. Okay? People choose where they work and people choose where and with whom they live. Focus on those specific areas, the place where the person works and the place where they live and who they live with. This is about the provider of the services. Okay? This refers to the choice in services received if they receive services while at home or at work. So the direct support staff, the job coach, and the employment specialist, the case management, the service, the provider of the service, the agency that provides that services, and the staff that provide the services. Okay. So I want to share quickly, because we're coming to the end of our time, how options can be presented to people. So first of all, always think about how you choose services in your own life, how you make a decision in your own life. Well, number one, you discover, you ask, you be proactive, and you talk to the person about what it is that they're looking for and what they want and need. So if a person needs a new doctor, they want a new doctor, you find out, okay, what's important to you in regards to a doctor? Okay. And then you can talk to people about the pros and cons about the different choices and options that are out there. You know, one example I always use is, my bank. My husband and I have different needs when it comes to our banks. I don't need a bank close to me because I very rarely go into the bank. I need online banking, I need free checking, and I need a good selection of ATMs. That's what I need. My husband likes a branch that's close. Okay. So we have to find out what people's priorities are. Talk to people about the benefits and the drawbacks, objectively speaking, of all the options that are out there. Do some online research with people, looking for doctors that take your insurance, veterinarians in the area, where to get your hair done, what's available. But online, you can do all kinds of research. You want to read reviews. You want to talk to others who have used or are using those same types of services. We learn a lot through word of mouth. Use pictures, create a resource manual, make visits if possible. To find out, is this person or this service or this agency going to meet my needs? And then interview and evaluate staff. Get people involved in interviewing their own staff, evaluating the staff that support them. Have them fill out staff interest surveys or preference worksheets so that they can identify what's important to them when it comes to the staff, and the hiring can be done to match what it is that they need. So applying decision-making, again, it goes to the 3 E's. People have to have informed choice. We have to know what people's preferences are, and they have to be supported. We have to be active in our efforts. We can't wait for them to ask. And we can't gatekeep decision-making, okay? Supports, providers, staff, families, any of us should not hold the person back from making decisions and having those decisions honored. People should be given objective information about what's available, and then their choices should be respected. So in the outcomes, you know, the triple E, experience, education, and exposure, it is crucial for a robust life experience to make informed decisions. It is critical in making the justification when people are not choosing services for things to be informed personal choice, okay? Informed is key. And we have to know, how have the 3 E's played out in this person's life to know that they are satisfied? If you've never made a decision before, you may not know where to start or how to go about doing that. With the individualized supports, we want to consider the following thing that we would think about as active efforts. We want to make sure that we're actively identifying people's preferences, we're actively providing support to the person, that there's, you know, ensuring a broad array of options are presented to the person, and that the organization or the staff are assisting people to learn the skills that they need to make choices and make decisions. And quickly, because I know we're running out of time and we're not going to have a lot for questions, just want to talk about some common misperceptions. Number one, being happy is not the same as informed choice. Discomfort is never a reason to avoid a conversation with someone. You know, meaning that we may know that a person's going to want something different if provided the option, and you know, maybe we just think it's going to be too much work or cause a hardship to help them change. That is no reason to avoid having conversations and providing options. There is no threshold. There is no specific number or percentage of services that the person must choose for this outcome to be in place. You have to look at all the information gathered to identify if true choice has been offered and is present. Perceived inability to understand or make decisions does not negate the need for conversation and support. The person should always be involved. The person, they decide what's important to them, even if the supports disagree on the value. Okay, the person makes that decision. And then knowledge of something existing, it isn't the same as decision making. Okay, we have to be informed. We have to know the pros and the cons, the good and the bad, the risks and the benefits. Quickly, I love this data slide just because one thing that we've learned is that those who choose their services have significantly more quality of life outcomes present than those who do not choose their services. So choice, this is what it means in a person's life. Choice and self-determination are important and can have a lot of impact on all aspects of a person's life. So I think Angela is going to pull out maybe any questions that we have in the Q&A box. And as she does that, I'm going to move on to the next slide, just because it talks about some resources for you all.
So there's actually quite a few questions that we won't get to all of them today, but we can follow up afterwards. But a couple people have asked, Liz, about when people maybe have been informed and are making choices, but their guardian or legal representative doesn't allow them to actually act on those choices. You know, how to consider that when you're looking at this outcome.
Yeah, in regards to this outcome, well, and not just this outcome, but any outcome really, it comes down to advocacy and communication. You know, every guardian, their reason could be different. And so I think it's really important to find out why the guardian is making that decision, kind of what the background and the history of it is. You may have to play intermediary. It really comes down to, number one, does the guardianship really have control or authority to make that decision? And that differs by type of guardianship and state or country. And then, you know, your role really is to the person. So do you have to get the person and the guardian together and kind of have a conversation to figure out, okay, where do we need to go from here? You know, what's going on? So.
So just sort of to follow up on that, if that's the case, then the outcome is probably not present, right, Liz?
It may not be, but I cannot give you any definitive answer.
Sure.
Because it comes down to it's really individualized is what it comes down to.
Sure.
It doesn't sound like it would be, but.
Yeah, yes. So another question that's asked a couple different ways, but one thought is that people don't necessarily have really much options to change their organization. In some states called their developmental services organization, because there are huge waiting lists to be able to change the whole organization. But this person is wondering if they're able to offer choices within their services about, staff and housing and other sorts of things. Would you consider that outcome to be present or not?
Again, very individualized. It goes back to the actively supporting and listening and providing what options are out there. So making sure the person understands what their options may be. In this state, this may be the option. The other options may be to move out of state, or when other options come up, we'll let you know. But it's really about being active in your advocating for the person and checking in with them to make sure that they understand at all times what is available, not just saying, oh, well, it's never going to change, and then never coming back and revisiting it. So again, very individualized, but I think that's a good way to start by actively helping the person understand the services that are available right now.
And I also think it's good, these kind of questions bring up for me that our goal is not to do everything that we can to get to be able to say that the outcome is present. Our goal is really just to discover what is the facts, or what are the facts. And so it's very possible the facts are that this isn't present. So the goal isn't necessarily to do everything we can to make it present. We really want to find out the facts, so then we can act on the supports that we provide.
Yeah, absolutely, Angela. The person owns the outcome. For some people, it might never be there. Organizations, can have the control over those supports and those active supports and the providing of the options. That's, it should be robust and individualized, and you do what you can for the supports, knowing that the outcome, like you said, Angela, may not ever be there, but that's not the most important thing. It's about providing the options and the information.
So I think we're out of time. We do have a few other questions, but we'll deal with those aside from the webinar.
Yeah,
thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Angela, my contact information is here. If anybody does have any questions that they would like to email me about, I'm more than happy to help out in any way possible. And I believe Seth was going to put the resources from the following slide into the Q&A box, so you can pull those from there. They're great resources.
So we appreciate you all joining us today. Obviously, lots of conversation to be had. And sometimes I know we get frustrated because it's very individualized, but that's the goal of our services, right? So that oftentimes is the answer. So thank you so much. We'll see you next time, I hope.